It's March Mania at Sports Interaction.
Wow.
NHL, NBA, March Madness, MLB, so much more. It's bananas. Bananas.
That was good spelling.
Thank you. Play Pinata Picks and Minute Madness exclusive games with insane odds you can't play anywhere else. Make your next bet at Sports Interaction. Download the app in Ontario. Use the QR code at the bottom of the screen. Or head to sportsinteraction.com/STPN to get started. It's 18 plus. Please play responsibly. Episode 7, Drive to Survive, was really about Sergio Perez. And it's funny because with Checo, it was the tale of two seasons, right? He had a pretty up and down first half and then dominant second half. But you see some things in this episode that I don't think you would expect, right? The way that Red Bull ended the season, I think people forget that they started off a little bit shaky and that it took till race 7 in Monaco for Perez to really kind of take off, and how he's sort of walking a tightrope.
Yeah, it's at the start of the season, the car was very geared towards, how Sergio, like his driving style, really, it allowed him to extract the performance. The car was had a little more understeer in it than oversteer. The front end wasn't as pointy that Max likes to drive. The car had a lot of weight to it as well. It was a heavy car. And then obviously they had some mechanical issues with it as well. But I mean, for the first part of the season, he actually did a pretty decent job, I would say. Getting into Monaco, I mean, with the crash in qualifying, I mean, everybody seems to think there's like this huge conspircy.
Well, Max certainly seemed to think it.
Thinks
I know,
that.
but
Drive to Survive did not address that, by the way, so we can talk about that now.
But the thing is like the more you look at it, it's kind of like there has to be so many different things, moving parts that play out for Sergio Perez to get that one. Really does.
Right.
Like how if you're like, in Q3 on the last push lap.
And Ferrari messes up.
Yeah.
Right. There's so many moving parts to that. Like Sergio doesn't even know if he's going to win.
So the thing was, if you don't know this, the thinking was that, and a lot of people believe this enough that Max Verstappen and his camp apparently believed it too, that Sergio Perez on the last lap, the push lap, as Tim just said, crashed on purpose in Monaco so he could stay at P1. And then, of course, Ferrari, that's the famous, box. Okay, no, stay out. They blow their 1-2 lead, and Perez wins the Monaco Grand Prix. And, of course, Max wants to win. And later on in the season, when they want Sergio, Max has already got the title sewed up. They want Sergio to have a guaranteed second place. And they said, Max, can you let Sergio by? And he wouldn't.
Yeah, that was in Brazil.
So,
which they also don't bring up.
They do not talk about.
I had a bit of an issue with this episode and how they kind of painted the Sergio arc, and that they wouldn't bring those things up. And
it's a pretty major part of his story.
It's a huge part of the entire season.
Yeah, it was a big part.
For the last 2 races, that's kind of all we talked about because this championship was wrapped up.
Yeah.
And then they didn't bring up the second place battle, and they painted Sergio like they gave him his episode and they showed his family and all that stuff. But after Monaco, Sergio had to issue an apology because he was out partying.
Oh, yeah.
He was with a woman that wasn't his wife, and he issued a public apology. I know this isn't your avenue, Tim. This is where I live.
There's a lot that went. Yeah,
I live in these weeds of the reality of the driver, so this is what I'm invested in.
Jesse's TMZ over here.
Yeah, but he issued a public apology to his wife because he partied too hard. He was with a bunch of girls he wasn't supposed to be with.
And
they were grinding in a club. And the video, you can go look at the video. So the fact that Drive to Survive was like, this is the happy Checo episode where he's with his family and then he wins Monaco and everything's good. That just wasn't the reality of the situation at all.
And what is the reality of his relationship with Max now? Because obviously after Monaco, it must have been poisoned.
I mean, you would. I mean, from my understanding, they've sorted it out behind the scenes. Whatever happened at Brazil, may not happen again, but we don't know. Obviously, once the drivers get on the track, it's kind of a different story, and it's a different animal. You can't really control it. It's hard. From the outside looking in, it things at Red Bull, I mean, they seems pretty good so far. I mean,
winning solves a lot.
Yeah, they steamrolled everybody.
Well, and for Checo, I thought it was an interesting pickup when they signed him in the first place, because you thought maybe at the time Alex Albon, who was in that second seat, was going to be the guy that would stick around. They develop him in that seat, they'd take their lumps, but Christian wasn't going to have that. And I think the the fascinating thing about Checo in that seat is that he may not have ever gotten back into Formula One. Not a guy that they ever expected to be top of the field. Yeah. So when we talk about racing for a team like Red Bull, is it as cutthroat as they make it out? Or are Red Bull more cutthroat than the other teams? Like, what's the... Because it seemed they certainly portray Red Bull as win or you're out.
Yeah.
And Mercedes has to be like that too, right?
Yeah, I've never been a part of the Red Bull driver program, but I'm friends with drivers who have, and it's high pressured situations, and it gets you ready for Formula One. You know what I mean? Like it does. Even in the junior categories, the amount of pressure that the whole teams put on the Red Bull Academy drivers, I mean, it's a lot of pressure, and there's a reason behind it. It's can you deal with this, win, then you'll be ready for Formula One, because at that point, when you get to F1, you can deal with anything if you can deal with all of this. So it's a very competitive, aggressive, I don't want to say environment, but it's in terms of how they push you, they push you, which is good.
Well, I mean, at any one time, there are 5 or 6 Red Bull Academy drivers in the field.
It's tough, but at the end of the day, I mean, Formula One is tough. Like, it's hard, right? There's only 20 drivers in these cars on the grid, or from everywhere around the world. There's only 20 of them, and that is it. And so there is a certain expectation that is expected from you as a driver when you're there, that you perform. Every lap is your best lap. Every time you are in the car, there's no time off. There is no like slacking of any kind. I mean, you can't, there's no shifts off. Like, if you take a session off, like a free practice 1 session off, like you could be in a lot of trouble for that. Like, it's push all the time, doesn't stop. And so for their academy, they really push their drivers, but it gets them ready. And it's like some drivers, really excel at it, and some just don't. I think the stuff with like Alex Albon, like that's a car that wasn't meant for him. Alex. It just wasn't. Same with Pierre. Like, it's just a car that's not really meant for them, because Max has such a specific driving style that no one on the grid really has. And it's hard to get comfortable and get your confidence to do the things that Max does with a race car. Like, the rear is always like very lively, and it's like
sliding everywhere at all times.
It's like, you go through trying to think of some corners where it's like, really kind of, I don't know. Like, if you go through like Beckett's complex at Silverstone, and like the change of direction with the car, like, it's going to be sliding a little bit. And if you're like not that confident with the front end and the rear end of the car, it's like, that's like really hard to like get your brain to accept and to understand. Like, hey, like, if Max can do this, I should be able to do it. But then like the car is giving me something totally different.
Do we underrate Sergio Perez as a driver then?
I think so. I mean, I've always really rated him quite highly, simply because of all the experience that he has. And we've seen what he's been able to do when the car is a little more tailored to his driving style. I hate to go, I know we're doing a DTS sort of thing here, but like, if we go to Bahrain this past weekend for the first race of the 2023 season, I mean, Sergio was actually pretty decent.
Spectacular.
Like, he was like on it pretty quick, and you have to remember that he's under pressure too because of Daniel Ricciardo in the wing.
So I wanted to ask, because they don't talk about this in Drive to Survive, but I thought it was a perfect thing they talk about being, there's 2 things I want to talk about here. They talk about being the secondary guy to Max Verstappen. Why is that so hard? Why do drivers, or being the secondary guy to Lewis, or the secondary guy to Charles? Why is it such a problem?
You don't want to be the second guy, right? You want to be the guy. Like, no driver ever wants to come into a team. I remember the days with like Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello. Like, I mean, Rubens knew
pretty obvious.
But Rubens knew what the plan was, right? It's like, try and capture a couple wins. Maybe you finish quite high in the drivers' championship. Michael is our guy. He is our. And so I think like there are some teams, like Red Bull in particular, that are just like, listen, we need one driver to build upon. And we need one driver that we're going to circle around. And we need to have a strong number 2 that can be there to protect him if we need that, or can push Max even more to another level. And I think they looked up and down the grid during that time, and they're like, hey, Sergio Perez is the next best driver here that we could put in with Max, who could, 1, push him, and 2, maybe play that team game. And then if we look back to, I hate bringing up 2021 and Abu Dhabi.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? I know I hate it. Sorry.
Sergio's the reason Max has a championship.
Yes.
Like,
all those times he helped him?
Yeah, he helped him, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, he played that number 2 sort of role.
I think that race got him the extension, honestly.
Yeah.
Like the extension that he signed after Monaco last year, I think he got that in 21 in the championship race, because Christian needed to see that, right? They need the drivers. Max is going to get you the drivers, and you need both of those guys working together to get you the team championship.
Sorry.
Valtteri Bottas was amazing at Mercedes because he played the number 2 game, and he was willing to do it the entire time.
I think, like with Valtteri, it's like once he figured out at the beginning of the season where he was going to like stack up, if he was going to challenge Lewis or if he wasn't, then he knew that there was going to be opportunity for him to get wins and pole positions at certain races, but he also knew that he would have to play somewhat of a team game, so to speak. That's hard for a driver to do.
It's just really against hard. How
your goal is to win.
Yeah, that's it. That's what you've been trained to do.
It's so difficult.
I think people do want to know about Daniel. I mean, he's a fascinating character, and he is now, he had the opportunity apparently to be a reserve driver at both Mercedes and Red Bull. That was the word. And it was sort of come down. Mercedes wanted him to be at every race. Red Bull said, you don't have to be at every race. You can take some time off. You don't have to travel. We need you at these PR events. And we know you can drive, and we know you can drive a Red Bull. So what is that relationship? Is he something where if Sergio falters this year, Daniel's in?
If I'm Christian Horner, that's what I'm doing.
Wow.
I'm making sure that my reserve driver is excellent and like top of the top. Like that's who I would do. I don't think like any other team. Like who wouldn't? Why?
I mean, yeah.
He's a Grand Prix winner. He has a ton of experience. He's fast when things are going
and
his
he's
way.
good in the halls too, right? That matters behind the scenes, right?
It does. It makes
you can get along with Max
100%. Gets along with Max. So that's the thing, right? Like you've got this guy. Like,
do you think they after this year? No matter how Sergio does, do you think they consider that, or do you think it's sort of like if Sergio does great, why mess with a good thing?
Yeah, I think if like Sergio, does a pretty decent job in 2023, I don't see why they don't keep rolling with him. That only makes sense, right? You don't want to upset that balance of like your number
You're winning.
one and like
right. Why mess with something that's going so well?
Yeah, exactly right. Because then you get Daniel in there, and he's going to want to win. Exactly. He's going to want to challenge Max because that's what he did when they were teammates before.
Right.
So because there wasn't really a number 1 and a number 2 when Daniel and Max were teammates.
Well, there's the famous story of when they went into the contract negotiations, Helmut Marko is apparently supposed to have said,
yes,
we want Daniel to win in 2019, and then we want Max to win in 2020 and in 2021. And that is what apparently soured the relationship, and that's why he left for Renault. Now, Helmut Marko is not known for being good with his words. He's about as brutal as he can be. But apparently a really beloved guy.
I was talking to Max last month, and Helmut Marko had said on a German publication that Max was getting a simulator built in his private jet. And so I was like, Max, Helmut said this. I'm like, dude, you really got a simulator in your jet? And he's like, no. He's like, you got the whole story wrong. It's like, so apparently Max got a simulator installed in his motorhome. He takes with him around Europe. So when he goes to the European races, what he likes to do is Max likes to, when he's done with his day with racing, he usually goes and plays video games. And now he's got a simulator, and he's like, I love it. So he's like, I'm just going to play that at night before I go to bed.
Max has made waves in the video game community.
Yes.
He's been really on it this offseason.
Yeah, I was watching a video actually on YouTube the other day, and I know that he went viral for that clip where he got mad because his race team was like errored and it's stuck in the pit. But apparently he is unbelievable on his sim. He's crazy.
He wins virtual world championships all the time.
Yeah. Like this is like
that's what he does.
Yeah. Like here's the thing. Like Max is like I mean, he is another one of those generational talents. Like, you know, we've had like Fernando is probably the close to the top of his generation. Same with Lewis, Max as well. We need to see who else is going to be in the mix with Max, because I think there's more on this grid than just him. But, you know, that being said, yeah, I mean, he's the stuff he does off the track with video games. Like I was talking about this. He did a deal with EA Sports. Oh, okay. And so I was like talking to him about his deal with EA Sports, and like, yeah, he's like, I'm gonna, you know, I'm paraphrasing here. Obviously, he's like, I'm gonna help him a bit with their video games and whatever. Like, but that's like hobby for him. And it's awesome.
Just to help. Because they're trying to make that into a sim, right? Like they're trying to make that video game super close.
Yeah, I think so. Like the F1 game, right? Yeah. They're trying to get that thing really dialed in.
It's hard.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
it's a hard game.
That's racing, right?
But Max he's a special person. He's unique in that, like, everything about his life since he was born has been racing.
Yeah.
You know, not many drivers are in that same situation. He seems just another notch above the 0.01% of drivers in the world. He's like a little notch above all of those drivers.
Exactly. He's kind of like one of those ones who has like the gift. So this is like what we like to call it.
100%.
So remember, you can always, and I don't know if you've been following this long, but we're doing a reaction episode for every single one of the Drive to Survive episodes. And of course, Tim is the newest member of SDPN, and he's got a show, and it's this one. It's called Nailing the Apex. It'll be out 3 times a week, before Grand Prix, after Grand Prix, and midweek, just to keep you going. And I'm especially looking forward to the gap seasons. There's the spot where the Chinese Grand Prix isn't there.
You got me sweating.
And then and then silly season this year.
What am I going to do?